In a galaxy where size determines status and strength rules supreme, what happens when the smallest cadet in the most prestigious military academy becomes the personal guardian of the universe's deadliest apex predator? When 17-year-old human Maya Chun steps onto the gleaming floors of the Galactic Defense Academy, she's not just the shortest student in the institution's thousand-year history. She's also harboring a secret that could reshape everything the galaxy believes about power, protection, and what it truly means to be strong. The other cadets tower over her by feet, some by entire body lengths. They come from warrior races that have conquered star systems, from species that breathe plasma and crush metal with their bare hands. But none of them know that the quiet girl from the backwater planet Earth has already done something no one else in the Academy has ever accomplished. She's earned the unwavering loyalty of a creature so dangerous that entire fleets change course to avoid its hunting grounds. As Maya navigates the brutal politics and impossible challenges of the Academy, she must keep her extraordinary bond hidden while proving that sometimes the greatest strength comes in the smallest packages. Because when the galaxy's most ancient enemy returns to claim what they believe is theirs, Maya and her devoted guardian will show the universe that humans don't just belong among the stars. They were born to protect them. This is the story of how the smallest cadet became the galaxy's greatest protector, and how a bond forged in trust became the key to survival itself. Maya Chun stood at the observation deck of the transport ship, watching the Galactic Defense Academy grow larger in the viewport. The massive station hung in space like a silver jewel, its crystalline towers stretching for miles in every direction. Docking bays the size of small cities dotted its surface, and streams of ships moved in carefully choreographed patterns around its perimeter. She pressed her palm against the cool metal of the viewport, her reflection staring back at her. At barely 5 feet tall, she looked even smaller against the vast backdrop of space. Her dark hair was pulled back in the regulation style, and her new cadet uniform hung perfectly pressed on her slight frame. The other passengers gave her curious looks, probably wondering what a human child was doing on a transport headed to the most elite military academy in the galaxy. If they only knew. The ship shuddered slightly as it entered the academy's docking sequence. Through the speakers, the captain announced their arrival in Standard Galactic, followed by translations in dozens of other languages. Maya recognized most of them from her studies, though hearing them spoken by their native species would be different. The academic recordings never captured the rumbling bass of a Crothan voice or the musical whistles that Alory used for emphasis. "First time at the academy?" asked a voice behind her. Maya turned to see a Zentorian cadet approaching. He was typical of his species, nearly 8 feet tall, with blue-gray skin and eyes like chips of ice. The insignia on his collar marked him as a third-year student. His muscled frame moved with the easy confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the galaxy. "Yes," Maya replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'm looking forward to starting classes." The Zentorian's laugh was like grinding stone. "Classes, right." He looked her up and down with obvious amusement. "Tell me, little human, what exactly do you think you're going to accomplish here? The Academy isn't some diplomatic school where species send their younglings to learn about galactic culture. This is where warriors are forged." Other passengers were starting to notice the conversation. A group of Crothan cadets, each one massive enough to wrestle starship engines, had turned to watch. Their red-scaled faces showed the same mixture of amusement and confusion that Maya had been seeing for weeks during her journey. "I understand what the Academy is," Maya said calmly. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't belong." "Belong?" The Zentorian's eyes widened in mock surprise. "Human, I've seen your species' military records. Impressive for a young civilization. I'll give you that. But you're talking about joining the ranks with cadets who come from races that have been waging war since before your planet had multicellular life. I'm stronger than your entire planet's champion weightlifters. Korvac over there could bite through battleship armor. And you—" He gestured at her slight form. You look like you couldn't win a fight against a Academy maintenance drone. The Crothan cadets chuckled, a sound like boulders tumbling down a mountain. More passengers were gathering now, creating a loose circle around Maya and her challenger. She recognized the dynamic immediately. She was being tested, sized up, marked as either a threat or prey. Maya had faced this exact situation countless times during her journey to the Academy. Every stop, every transport transfer, every casual conversation eventually led to someone questioning her presence. She learned to handle it with patience and careful words. What they didn't understand was that she wasn't afraid of their size or strength. She was afraid they might discover why she wasn't afraid. Strength comes in many forms, Maya said, her voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet observation deck. The Academy accepts cadets based on merit, not just physical power. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother testing mental capabilities, tactical thinking, or leadership potential. Pretty words, the Zentorian said, stepping closer. His shadow fell across her like a dark cloud. But when you're facing down a Nexus battle mech or leading troops into a war zone, pretty words won't keep you alive. Size matters. Strength matters. Being able to physically dominate your enemies matters. He reached out with one massive hand, clearly intending to demonstrate his point by grabbing her shoulder or perhaps pushing her backward. It was a common intimidation tactic among the larger species. Use superior size to establish dominance without technically starting a fight. Maya didn't move to avoid the hand. She didn't need to. The temperature in the observation deck dropped 10 degrees in the span of a heartbeat. Every piece of metal in the room began to vibrate with a frequency just below the range of most species' hearing, but definitely within their ability to feel. The viewport behind Maya suddenly showed a massive shadow passing outside the ship, something large enough to momentarily block out the stars. The Zentorian's hand stopped inches from Maya's shoulder. His icy eyes had gone wide, and he was staring at something behind her. The color had drained from his blue-gray skin, leaving him looking almost translucent. Maya turned to look out the viewport and saw exactly what she'd expected to see. A creature that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist according to most galactic species' understanding of physics and biology, was keeping perfect pace with their transport ship. It moved through space without any visible means of propulsion, its form shifting between solid matter and something that seemed to bend light around itself. The Void Serpent was roughly the size of a small moon, though its exact dimensions were impossible to determine. Its body seemed to be made of living shadow interwoven with patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. Where it should have had a head, there was instead a collection of sensory organs that defied easy description. Not quite eyes, not quite antennae, but something that could track prey across star systems and peer through dimensions that most species didn't even know existed. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was completely impossible. And it was looking directly at the observation deck with what could only be described as protective interest. "What is that thing?" someone whispered. Maya thought it might have been one of the Crothan, but she couldn't be sure. Every voice in the room had gone small and frightened. "Void Serpent," another cadet answered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought they were myths." "They are myths," a third voice said, but it shook with uncertainty. "They have to be. Nothing that large could survive in space without life support. Nothing organic could move that fast without inertial compensators." Maya kept her expression carefully neutral as she watched her oldest friend pace their ship. She could feel the creature's attention like a warm presence in her mind, the psychic equivalent of a gentle hand on her shoulder. Through their bond, she sensed its amusement at the other cadet's fear and its mild annoyance at the Zentorian's behavior. The Zentorian was backing away from Maya now, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "It's following the ship," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Why is it following the ship?" "Void serpents are apex predators," someone else said. "They hunt things that intrude on their territory. If one is tracking us, we need to tell the captain." Another cadet interrupted. "Get the shields up, plot an evasion course." Maya almost smiled at that, as if anything built by the galaxy's current technology could evade a creature that existed partially outside normal space-time. As if shields designed to stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles could keep out something that moved between dimensions as easily as swimming through water. Instead, she turned away from the viewport and started walking toward the exit. "I should get to my quarters," she said to no one in particular. "Prepare for arrival." Behind her, the crowd of cadets was growing more agitated by the moment. Someone had indeed gone to alert the captain, and she could hear the ship's intercom crackling to life with emergency announcements. Orders to return to quarters, requests for all passengers to remain calm, assurances that the situation was being handled. Maya walked through the corridors of the transport ship, ignoring the growing chaos around her. Other passengers pressed against viewports, trying to catch glimpses of the creature outside. Crew members rushed past with grim expressions, probably running to battle stations that would be completely useless against their current shadow. She reached her quarters and settled onto the small bunk to wait. Through the metal walls of the ship, she could feel her companion's presence like a steady heartbeat. It wasn't going anywhere until she was safely delivered to the academy. 20 minutes later, the intercom crackled again. This time, the captain's voice carried a mixture of relief and bewilderment. "Attention passengers. The unidentified entity that was tracking our ship has departed. We're proceeding with normal docking procedures. All passengers should prepare for arrival at the Galactic Defense Academy." Maya packed her few belongings into the regulation duffel bag. Through her small porthole, she could see the academy growing larger as they approached. Somewhere out there, beyond the range of the ship's sensors, her friend was settling into a patient orbit. It would wait, hidden in the spaces between spaces, until she needed it again. The docking procedure went smoothly. Maya found herself in a long line of new cadets being processed through the academy's intake center. The massive hall could have held several city blocks, and the ceiling disappeared into shadows high above. Holographic displays showed instructions in hundreds of languages, and processing stations handled dozens of species simultaneously. Maya noticed that word of the Void Serpent incident had already spread among the new arrivals. Clusters of cadets spoke in hushed tones, sharing theories about what the creature had been doing and why it had chosen to follow their particular transport. She heard her own transport number mentioned several times, along with increasingly wild speculation about what might have attracted such a dangerous predator. The Zentorian from the observation deck was 3 stations ahead of her in the processing line. He kept glancing back at her, his expression now showing confusion rather than hostility. During their brief encounter, she had transformed in his mind from a harmless curiosity to something potentially much more dangerous. He just couldn't figure out exactly what. When Maya's turn came, she approached the processing station with calm confidence. The officer behind the desk was a Korvok, a member of a species that looked like someone had tried to cross a bear with a rhinoceros, and then decided the result wasn't quite imposing enough. His uniform was specially tailored to accommodate his massive frame and natural armor plating. "Name and planet of origin," he rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had processed thousands of cadets over the years. "Maya Chun, Earth, Sol System," she replied. The Korvok's small eyes narrowed as he consulted his holographic display. "Human. Interesting. We don't get many of your species. Your test scores." He paused, reading something that made his expression change. "These are your actual scores?" "Yes, sir." He looked up from the display, studying her face carefully. Tactical analysis in the 98th percentile. Strategic planning in the 99th. Combat assessment. He trailed off, frowning. "There must be an error in your file. Your combat score shows as evaluation incomplete." Maya had been expecting this question. The combat assessment required fighting against holographic opponents designed to match typical Academy cadet capabilities. The simulation's parameters couldn't accommodate my particular skill set. Couldn't accommodate? The Korvok's voice carried skepticism. The Academy's combat simulators are designed to test candidates from species that range from tiny insectoids to massive space whales. What exactly is your particular skill set that our systems couldn't handle? I don't fight alone, Maya said simply. Before the Korvac could ask for clarification, another officer approached the desk. This one was humanoid, but clearly not from any species Maya recognized, tall, elegant, with features that seemed to shift slightly when viewed peripherally. Officer Breck, the newcomer, said, "I'll handle this cadet's processing." The Korvac looked surprised, but stepped aside without argument. The new officer's insignia marked him as someone with significant authority, though Maya couldn't place his exact rank or position. "Miss Chun," the officer said, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested a complex vocal structure, "I am Administrator Thane. We've been looking forward to your arrival. Your admission to the Academy has generated considerable interest among the faculty. I hope to live up to expectations," Maya replied carefully. Administrator Thane's expression might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell with his shifting features. "Oh, I suspect you'll exceed them. Tell me, was your journey here eventful?" It was a loaded question, and they both knew it. Maya met his gaze steadily. "I learned a lot about my fellow cadets during the trip." "I'm sure you did. And did any of them learn about you?" "Only what I wanted them to learn." Administrator Thane nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Discretion will be important during your time here. The Academy has many students from many worlds, and not all of them are prepared to expand their understanding of what strength truly means." He handed her a datapad containing her room assignment, class schedule, and Academy regulations. "You've been placed in advanced strategic studies, along with select cadets who show exceptional promise. Your first class begins tomorrow at 0800 station time. I trust you'll find the experience educational." Maya took the datapad and shouldered her duffel bag. "Thank you, Administrator Thane. I won't disappoint you." "I don't believe you will," he replied. "Oh, and Miss Chun, if you need anything during your stay here, anything at all, please don't hesitate to contact my office. We want to ensure your time at the Academy is as productive as possible." Another loaded statement. Maya nodded her understanding and followed the flow of cadets toward the residential sections of the Academy. Her assigned quarters were in Tower 7, of a residential complex that housed approximately 2,000 cadets. The elevator ride to her floor was crowded with new arrivals from dozens of different species, all chattering excitedly about their new surroundings. Maya listened to their conversations, filing away information about her classmates' backgrounds, specialties, and homeworlds. Room 7 to 4472 was a standard single-occupancy cadet quarters, small but efficiently designed, with a sleeping area, study desk, storage compartments, and a small viewport looking out into space. Maya set her duffel on the bed and activated the room's communication system to review her class assignments. Advanced Strategic Studies was indeed an elite program, she discovered. Only 30 cadets from the entire Academy were selected for the course, and they came from species that were considered the galaxy's finest military minds. She recognized several names from her pre-Academy research, cadets whose families had produced legendary generals, tactical innovators, and strategic masterminds. Maya was the only human on the list. She realized as she cross-referenced the names with species' average sizes, by far the smallest member of the class. The next shortest would be a Zelthari cadet, and even they would tower over her by at least 2 feet. As she prepared for sleep, Maya allowed herself a moment to reach out through her mental connection to her companion. The Void Serpent was exactly where she expected it to be, hidden in a fold of space-time just beyond the Academy's sensor range, patient and watchful. Through their bond, she felt its contentment at her safe arrival and its curiosity about the challenge ahead. The creature had never experienced formal education, but it understood the concept of learning, growing stronger through knowledge and practice. Maya smiled as she settled into her narrow Academy bed. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new rivals, and new opportunities to prove herself. The other cadets expected her to fail, to wash out within the first few weeks when the training became too intense for someone of her size and species. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Outside her viewport, stars wheeled slowly as the academy rotated through its artificial day-night cycle. Somewhere among those stars, ancient enemies were stirring, preparing to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. When that time came, the galaxy would need protectors who understood that strength wasn't measured in muscle mass or bite force. The galaxy would need guardians who knew that the greatest power came not from dominance, but from the bonds forged between unlikely allies. Maya closed her eyes and let sleep take her, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she needed to be. Maya woke before her alarm, a habit ingrained from years of early morning training sessions on Earth. The Academy's artificial dawn was just beginning to filter through her viewport, painting the metal walls of her quarters in soft golden hues. She performed her morning routine with quiet efficiency, reviewing her class schedule while her regulation breakfast heated in the room's food processor. Advanced Strategic Studies would be her first class, followed by Galactic Military History, Xenobiology for combat applications, and physical training. It was an intensive schedule designed to push even the most capable cadets to their limits. Maya felt a familiar flutter of excitement in her stomach. Not nervousness, but anticipation. She dressed in her crisp academy uniform and made her way through the corridors toward the academic section. The halls were already bustling with activity as thousands of cadets moved between classes. Maya noted the way conversations stopped as she passed, how groups of older students turned to stare at the tiny human walking among them. The whispers had already started. "That's her, the one from the transport with the void serpent. She looks even smaller in person. My dorm mate heard from someone in processing that her combat scores were sealed." Sealed? Why would they seal a human's scores? Maya kept her expression neutral and her pace steady. Let them wonder. Speculation was easier to manage than truth, and the more mysterious she appeared, the more likely other cadets would keep their distance until she was ready to reveal her capabilities. The Advanced Strategic Studies classroom was located in the Academy's primary academic tower, 30 floors up from the main level. Maya arrived 5 minutes early to find she was the third student present. The other two, a Zentaurian she didn't recognize, and a Korvac female whose natural armor plates were polished to mirror brightness, looked up as she entered. The classroom itself was impressive. Holographic displays covered every wall, currently showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with ship movements and territorial boundaries marked in glowing colors. The desks were adjustable to accommodate different species' physiology, and the central area contained a tactical projection system that could create battle scenarios in real time. Maya chose a seat in the middle section and began reviewing her notes on galactic military doctrine. Around her, other students filtered in, each one representing their species' finest young military minds. She recognized several faces from the Academy's promotional materials. Thyrak the Bold, a Crothan whose family had conquered 3 star systems. Vexhai Shimmertail, an Aelori whose innovative fleet tactics had already earned publication in military journals. Jorik Ironhand, whose dwarven clan had held off an entire enemy battle group with nothing but mining equipment and sheer determination. Each of them was impressive. Each carried themselves with the confidence that came from being the best their worlds had to offer. And each of them was staring at Maya with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. The last student to arrive before class began was the Zentaurian from her transport, the one who had tried to intimidate her in the observation deck. He paused when he saw her, his expression cycling through recognition, confusion, and something that might have been respect. He approached her desk slowly, moving with the careful gait of someone who had reassessed a potential threat. "You're the human from yesterday's transport," he said, his voice much quieter than it had been during their first encounter. "Maya Chun," she replied, extending a hand in the human custom of greeting. He stared at her hand for a moment before carefully taking it in his much larger one. His grip was gentle, almost tentative, a stark contrast to his earlier aggressive posture. Kriegs Voltaire. I wanted to apologize for yesterday. My behavior was inappropriate. Apology accepted, Maya said simply. We all have preconceptions. What matters is whether we're willing to learn from them. Kriegs nodded slowly. The creature that followed our ship. Do you have any idea why it was there? Maya met his gaze steadily. Void serpents are unpredictable. Maybe it was curious about the ship. Maybe it was hunting something else entirely, and we just happened to be in its path. It wasn't entirely a lie. Void serpents were unpredictable to everyone except the rare individuals who had earned their trust. And her companion had indeed been curious about the ship, specifically about the other students who would be sharing classes with Maya. Before Kriegs could ask follow-up questions, the classroom door closed with a soft hiss, and their instructor entered. Maya felt her breath catch slightly as she recognized the species, a Nexari, one of the galaxy's most ancient and powerful races. They were rumored to be nearly extinct, their numbers reduced to a handful of individuals scattered across known space. The instructor was tall, even by Nexari standards, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light. Her eyes were solid silver, lacking visible pupils, and her movements carried an otherworldly grace that suggested she existed partially outside normal space-time. "I'm Instructor Velterra," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond normal hearing. "For the next 4 years, you will be my students in the art and science of strategic thinking. Some of you will excel. Some of you will fail. All of you will be changed by the experience." Her silver gaze swept across the assembled cadets, lingering for a moment on each face. When her eyes met Maya's, there was a flicker of something, recognition, perhaps, or assessment. Strategic thinking, Velterra continued, is not about memorizing battle formations or calculating optimal firing solutions. It is about understanding the fundamental nature of conflict and finding ways to achieve victory that your enemies cannot predict or counter. It requires you to think beyond the limitations of your own species' perspective and see the battlefield as your opponents see it. She gestured, and the holographic displays around the room shifted to show a complex tactical scenario. 3 fleets of different configurations faced off in a star system with multiple planets, asteroid fields, and gravitational anomalies. "Your first exercise," Velterra announced, "will be conducted in teams. You will analyze this scenario and propose a strategy for achieving victory with minimal losses. The twist: you will not be commanding your own species' forces." Maya studied the tactical display with growing interest. The scenario was complex, with multiple variables and potential outcomes. More importantly, it was designed to test their ability to think outside their natural assumptions about warfare. "Team assignments," Velterra continued, "have been made randomly to ensure diversity of perspective. Team 1, Thyrak the Bold, Cadet Shun, and Vexai Shimmertail." Maya felt a momentary flutter of amusement as she was paired with 2 of the class's most renowned tactical minds. Thyrak was known for his direct, aggressive approach to warfare, typical of Crothan military doctrine. Vexai, on the other hand, favored subtle maneuvering and psychological warfare, hallmarks of Elori strategy. As the teams formed up around different sections of the classroom, Maya could see the other students trying to figure out the dynamic of her group. Thyrak looked like he could bench press a small starship, while Vexai moved with the liquid grace of her species. Between them, Maya looked like a child who had wandered into the wrong classroom. "Interesting pairing," Thyrak rumbled as they gathered around their tactical display. His red-scaled face showed polite curiosity, but Maya could see the questions in his yellow eyes. "I confess I am not familiar with human military doctrine. What approach does your species typically favor?" "Adaptability," Maya replied. "Humans tend to be generalists rather than specialists. We study other species' tactics and incorporate whatever works best for the situation." Vexai's head tilted in the characteristic Elori gesture of interest. Her feathered crest shimmered with colors that indicated curiosity. A survival trait for a young species, she observed, her voice carrying the musical tones of her people. But this exercise requires us to command forces we've never used before. Adaptability may not be enough. Maya studied the tactical display more carefully. Their assigned forces were Korvac heavy assault ships, powerful but slow, designed for frontal attacks rather than maneuver warfare. Their opponents included a mixed fleet of fast Centaurian raiders and a defensive formation of dwarven fortress ships. The Korvac fleet has superior firepower, Thyrak noted, but these Centaurian raiders will run circles around us if we try a direct approach. And the dwarven fortress ships are nearly impregnable if they have time to establish defensive positions, Vexai added. We need to prevent them from linking up with the raiders. Maya nodded, but her attention was focused on something else, the asteroid field at the edge of the system. The rocks were positioned in an unusual pattern, almost like they had been deliberately arranged. More importantly, the gravitational readings showed instabilities that suggested recent activity. What if we're thinking about this wrong? She said quietly. Both her teammates looked at her with surprise. Thyrak's expression was polite, but skeptical, while Vexai's crest shifted to colors indicating confusion. Wrong how? Vexai asked. Maya pointed to the asteroid field. Look at the gravitational readings. These rocks haven't been in stable orbits for very long. Something moved them into this position recently, within the last few months, maybe weeks. Thyrak leaned closer to examine the data. You're right. But what does that have to do with our tactical situation? What if this isn't just a tactical exercise? Maya asked, what if we're looking at a real scenario? Something that actually happened, or is about to happen? The implications of her suggestion hung in the air between them. If Maya was correct, then they weren't just analyzing a hypothetical battle for academic credit. They were potentially studying intelligence data from an actual conflict zone. Vexai's crest had shifted to deep blues and purples, colors that indicated she was processing complex information. If that's true, then we need to think beyond just winning the immediate battle. We need to consider what our enemies were really trying to accomplish by arranging these forces this way. Maya felt a familiar stirring at the edge of her consciousness. Her companion, responding to her heightened attention and focus. The Void Serpent was still hidden beyond the Academy's sensors, but their mental link remained strong. Through that connection, she could sense something that her teammates couldn't detect through normal analysis. The asteroid field wasn't just unstable. It was actively dangerous, charged with some kind of exotic energy that would interact catastrophically with conventional ship drives. Whatever had moved those asteroids into position had created a trap, not for the forces shown in the tactical display, but for anyone foolish enough to try using the field as cover. The asteroids, she said suddenly, they're not just moved, they're weaponized. Thyrak and Vexai both stared at her. Around the classroom, other teams were deep in discussion about firing arcs and fleet formations, but Maya's group had stumbled onto something far more complex. Explain, Thyrak said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. Maya pointed to the energy readings buried in the tactical data. These aren't normal gravitational anomalies. Someone has been charging those asteroids with exotic matter, probably dark energy fluctuations. Any ship that gets too close will have its drive systems destabilized. Vexai's eyes widened as she followed Maya's analysis. A trap. But for whom? For us, Maya realized. This whole scenario, the Korvac fleet, the positioning of the enemy forces, it's designed to make us think the asteroid field is our best tactical option. We're supposed to use it for cover while we engage the enemy fleets. Thyrak was studying the data with growing amazement. How did you see this? I've been analyzing tactical scenarios since I could walk, and I missed it completely. Maya hesitated. The truth was that her companion had sensed the exotic energy through their psychic link, recognizing it as similar to the forces that void serpents use to move between dimensions. But she couldn't explain that without revealing far more than she was ready to share. Human pattern recognition, she said instead. We're good at spotting things that don't fit normal expectations. It wasn't entirely false. Humans did have excellent pattern recognition abilities, though Maya's insights were coming from a much more exotic source. Instructor Velterra had been moving between the teams, observing their discussions and occasionally offering subtle guidance. As she approached Maya's group, her silver eyes focused intently on their tactical display. An interesting analysis, she said, her voice carrying notes of approval. You've identified the primary trap in the scenario. Now, how do you counter it? We don't, Maya said without hesitation. We use it. Both her teammates looked at her in shock. Even Instructor Velterra's eyebrows rose slightly, an expression of surprise that seemed unusual for someone of her species. Use the trap, Thyrak asked. Against whom? Maya's fingers flew over the tactical display, highlighting ship positions and energy patterns. The enemy fleets aren't random either. Look at their formation, their position to respond to threats from specific vectors. They expect us to either charge directly at them or try to use the asteroid field for cover. But you said the asteroids are weaponized, Vexai protested. They are, but weaponized against conventional drive systems. What if we don't use conventional drives? Maya pulled up the technical specifications for Korvac assault ships. Like most military vessels, they carried emergency systems designed to operate when main drives were offline. Backup power, maneuvering thrusters, and, most importantly, emergency communication arrays that could punch through almost any interference. We send one ship into the asteroid field, she explained, but we shut down all its main systems first. Let it drift in on momentum alone, using only passive sensors and emergency communications. From the enemy's perspective, it looks like we fell for the trap. Thyrak was nodding slowly as he followed her reasoning. But the ship would still be functional, just running silent. Exactly. And while the enemy fleets are positioning to capitalize on our supposed mistake, our disabled ship can map the exact nature of the exotic energy field. Then, we can use that information to turn the asteroids into weapons against our enemies. Vexai's crest had shifted to brilliant golds and silvers, colors indicating excitement and admiration. You want to trigger the exotic energy deliberately, but direct it at the enemy forces instead of ourselves. The reading suggests that the energy is containable, but redirectable, Maya confirmed. If we can map the field patterns accurately, we can create a cascade effect that will disable every ship in the system except ours. Instructor Velterra was watching Maya's explanation with an expression that was difficult to read. When Maya finished outlining her strategy, the next re-instructor was quiet for several long moments. Cadet Chun, she said finally, your analysis demonstrates several advanced concepts that are typically not covered until third-year coursework. Where did you learn to recognize exotic energy signatures? Maya felt the weight of attention from not just her instructor, but her teammates as well. Around the classroom, other groups had noticed that their discussion had drawn Velterra's extended focus. Independent study, Maya replied carefully. I spent a lot of time reading about theoretical physics and unconventional warfare before coming to the academy. It was true as far as it went. She had indeed studied those subjects extensively. The fact that her studies had been guided by a creature that existed partially outside normal space-time was a detail she preferred to keep private. Velterra nodded slowly. Your strategy is sound, Cadet Chen. Moreover, it demonstrates exactly the kind of thinking that this course is designed to develop. The ability to see beyond conventional assumptions and find victory where others see only defeat. She moved on to observe other teams, leaving Maya with her companions. Thyrak and Vexai were both looking at her with new respect, their earlier assumptions about the small human clearly being rapidly revised. That was impressive, Vexai said quietly. Where I come from, that kind of tactical innovation would earn you a position on the Strategic Council. Among my people, Thyrak added, you would be honored as a battle sister. Size means nothing when you can see the battlefield more clearly than warriors twice your size. Maya felt a warmth that had nothing to do with their praise and everything to do with the growing sense that she might actually belong here. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she wasn't being judged solely on her physical size or her species' reputation. The class period ended with each team presenting their strategies to the group. Maya's team went last, and their unconventional approach drew surprised murmurs from the other cadets. Several teams had fallen into the asteroid field trap exactly as the scenario was designed, while others had attempted costly frontal assaults that would have resulted in massive casualties. As the students filed out for their next classes, Maya noticed that the whispers about her had changed in tone. Instead of skeptical dismissal, she was hearing words like innovative and unexpected. It was a small victory, but an important one. The rest of her first day proceeded more smoothly. Galactic military history proved to be a fascinating overview of conflicts spanning thousands of years, taught by a professor who had apparently lived through many of the events he described. Xenobiology for combat applications was intensely practical, focusing on how different species' physiologies affected their combat capabilities and weaknesses. Physical training was where Maya expected to face her greatest challenges. The Academy's gymnasium was enormous, designed to accommodate species with vastly different exercise requirements. Gravity could be adjusted in different sections, atmospheric composition could be modified, and obstacle courses could be reconfigured for everything from tiny insectoids to massive space whales. The instructor was a scarred Korvac veteran named Sergeant Ironhide, whose reputation for pushing cadets beyond their limits was legendary. As the new students assembled, Maya could see him evaluating each one, making mental notes about their likely capabilities and weaknesses. When his gaze fell on Maya, his expression didn't change, but she could see the calculation in his small eyes. He was trying to figure out how to design exercises that would challenge her without being impossible. Physical training at the academy, Sergeant Ironhide announced in a voice that could probably be heard across the entire gymnasium, is not about making you stronger or faster. You're already strong and fast, or you wouldn't be here. Physical training is about learning to push beyond what you think are your limits. He gestured to a series of obstacle courses arranged around the gymnasium. Each course is designed for different types of physiology. Choose the one that matches your species' capabilities and begin with basic conditioning. We will evaluate your performance and adjust difficulty accordingly. Maya studied the available courses. There was a heavy gravity section for species like the Korvac and Crothin, an aerial course for flying species, an aquatic section for water-breathing races, and a general course designed for humanoid species of average size and strength. Maya walked past all of them to a section that most students avoided, the experimental course, designed for species with unusual or hybrid capabilities. It was typically used by cadets whose physiology didn't fit neatly into standard categories. Sergeant Ironhide noticed her choice and approached with obvious curiosity. Cadet Shun, that course is configured for advanced students with non-standard abilities. Perhaps you should start with the general humanoid course. I'd like to try this one, Sergeant, Maya replied respectfully. If it's too difficult, I'll adjust. The Korvac instructor studied her for a moment, then shrugged. Your choice, cadet. But don't expect me to lower the difficulty when you realize you're in over your head. Maya began the course with a deceptively simple obstacle, a wall that was just slightly too high for her to reach the top handholds. A normal approach would require significant upper body strength to muscle up the vertical surface. Instead, Maya closed her eyes for a moment and reached out through her mental link. Her companion was still hidden beyond the Academy's sensors, but their connection remained strong. Through that bond, she could borrow just a fraction of the Void Serpent's spatial manipulation abilities. To anyone watching, it looked like Maya had simply made an impossibly precise jump, her small form seeming to hang in the air just a moment longer than physics should allow. She caught the top of the wall easily and pulled herself over with fluid grace. The next obstacle required navigating through a three-dimensional maze while sensors tracked her movement. Most cadets relied on memory and spatial reasoning to find the correct path. Maya let her enhanced senses guide her, following currents of air and energy that revealed the maze's structure. She completed the course in record time, moving with a combination of human agility and borrowed abilities that made her seem far more capable than her size suggested. When she finished, she found Sergeant Ironhide waiting with an expression of professional interest. "That was unexpected, Cadet Shun," he said. "Your movement patterns suggest training in disciplines not typically available on human worlds." "I had excellent teachers," Maya replied, which was perfectly true. The sergeant nodded slowly. "I'll be watching your progress with interest. The Academy has seen many surprising students over the years, but few who could complete that course on their first attempt." As Maya headed to the locker rooms to change, she could feel the stares of other students following her. Word would spread quickly about the tiny human who had somehow mastered one of the Academy's most challenging obstacle courses. Her first day was ending better than she had dared hope. She had proven herself academically with her tactical analysis, earned the respect of promising teammates, and demonstrated physical capabilities that defied easy explanation. Most importantly, she had managed to do all of it without revealing the true source of her abilities. That evening, as Maya reviewed her notes in her quarters, she felt her companion's distant presence like a warm pulse in her mind. Through their bond, she sensed its satisfaction with her successful first day and its curiosity about the challenges to come. Outside her viewport, stars wheeled slowly through space, and somewhere among them, ancient enemies continued their patient approach toward the galaxy's heart. But for now, Maya allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She was exactly where she needed to be, learning exactly what she needed to know. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new opportunities to prove herself, and new steps toward becoming the protector the galaxy would desperately need. But tonight, she was simply a cadet who had successfully completed her first day at the most prestigious military academy in known space. It was a good beginning. 3 weeks into her academy training, Maya had settled into a routine that balanced academic excellence with careful management of her growing reputation. Her tactical insights in advanced strategic studies had earned her recognition from both instructors and fellow cadets, while her unexpected performance in physical training continued to generate speculation about her background. She was walking through the Academy's central plaza after morning classes when the alert klaxons began sounding. The massive overhead displays that normally showed Academy announcements and scheduling information flickered to emergency status, bathing the plaza in pulsing red light. "All students report to designated emergency stations," announced a synthetic voice in dozens of languages. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Around Maya, thousands of cadets were moving with practiced efficiency toward the emergency stations scattered throughout the academy. The older students led the way, their movements showing the discipline that came from years of emergency drills. The newer cadets, Maya included, followed with less certainty but equal urgency. Maya's designated station was in Tower 7's main assembly hall, a cavernous space designed to hold the tower's entire population, if necessary. As she joined the stream of students heading toward the elevators, she noticed the tension in their voices. Emergency drills were common at the academy, but the announcement had specifically stated this wasn't one. The assembly hall was filling rapidly when Maya arrived. Students clustered in groups by species and year, creating a complex pattern of colors and forms across the vast space. At the front of the hall, a holographic display showed the Academy's status boards, but the information was encrypted and unreadable to student access levels. Maya found herself standing near Thyrak and Vexhai from her strategic studies class. The massive Crothan looked calm, but alert, while the Aelori's crest was cycling through colors that indicated heightened awareness and concern. "Any idea what this is about?" Thyrak asked quietly. "Nothing official," Vexhai replied, her musical voice carrying undertones of worry. "But there have been rumors for the past few days about increased military activity in the outer sectors." Maya felt a familiar stirring at the edge of her consciousness. Her companion was responding to her heightened emotional state, its attention focusing across the vast distance that separated them. Through their mental link, she could sense the Void Serpent's awareness of something approaching the Academy, something that registered as a potential threat. Before she could analyze that sensation further, the Assembly Hall's main display activated. Administrator Thane appeared, his shifting features more solid than usual, suggesting he was experiencing stress that affected his natural camouflage abilities. "Students of the Galactic Defense Academy," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustics. "I am addressing you today to inform you of a developing situation that may affect your training schedule." The hall fell silent as thousands of cadets focused their attention on the administrator. Even the constant background hum of conversation in dozens of languages faded to nothing. Approximately 6 hours ago, long-range sensors detected an unidentified fleet approaching our position. The fleet's configuration and technology do not match any known galactic civilization. They're not responding to communication attempts, and their course will bring them within Academy defense perimeter in approximately 18 hours. Murmurs rippled through the assembled students. Maya felt her blood run cold as pieces of information clicked together in her mind. An unknown fleet with technology that didn't match current galactic civilizations could only mean one thing. The Devourers had returned. As a precautionary measure, Administrator Thane continued, "All student leave has been canceled, and the Academy has been placed on high alert. Classes will continue on a modified schedule, but all students should be prepared for potential evacuation procedures if the situation escalates." The display shifted to show a tactical overview of local space. Maya could see the Academy's position, the approaching fleet marked as red contacts, and the defensive formations of ships moving to intercept. What she didn't see, and what she desperately hoped the Academy's sensors hadn't detected, was her companion's position. "Are there any questions?" Administrator Thane asked. A senior cadet from one of the upper years raised his hand. "Sir, what do we know about the unknown fleet's capabilities?" "Limited information at this time," Thane replied. "Their ships appear to be constructed from materials not found in any current database. Long-range scans suggest they are significantly larger than standard galactic vessels, but their exact capabilities remain unknown." Another student asked, "Will the Academy's defenses be sufficient to protect us?" Administrator Thane's expression showed the kind of confidence that came from years of dealing with student concerns, but Maya could see the uncertainty beneath it. The Academy maintains one of the most sophisticated defense networks in the galaxy. Additionally, the Galactic Defense Force has dispatched reinforcement fleets to our position. We are well protected. Maya wanted to laugh at that statement, but it would have been bitter laughter. The Academy's defenses were indeed impressive by current galactic standards, designed to stop any known military threat. But the Devourers weren't a known threat. They were something far older and more dangerous than anything the current galactic civilization had ever faced. The assembly continued for another 20 minutes as administrators outlined modified schedules and emergency procedures. When the students were finally dismissed, Maya found herself walking back to her quarters in the company of Thyrak and Vex High, who had fallen into step beside her. "This is concerning," Vex High said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested deep worry. "My people have legends about fleets that appear from nowhere with technology beyond our understanding. They never end well." Thyrak nodded grimly. "The Crothan archives speak of similar encounters. Ancient enemies who vanished long ago, only to return when least expected." Maya remained silent, but her mind was racing. If the Devourers had indeed returned, then everything she had trained for her entire life was about to be put to the test. The Academy, for all its impressive reputation, was about to face an enemy that had once brought the galaxy to its knees. "Maya," Vexai said suddenly, "you've been very quiet. Do you know something about this situation?" Maya looked at her classmates, These people who had become her first real friends at the academy. They deserved to know what they were facing, but the truth was so far beyond their understanding that they probably wouldn't believe it. My people have stories too, she said carefully, about ancient conflicts and enemies that were thought defeated, but merely dormant. It was as close to the truth as she dared venture. Thyrak and Vexhai exchanged glances, clearly sensing that Maya's knowledge went deeper than she was admitting, but they didn't press the issue. When they reached the residential section, Maya excused herself and returned to her quarters. Once the door sealed behind her, she activated the room's privacy protocols and reached out through her mental connection to her companion. The response was immediate and intense. Through their bond, Maya could sense the Void Serpent's recognition of the approaching threat. Her companion had been monitoring the unknown fleet since before the Academy's sensors had detected them, tracking their approach through dimensions that normal technology couldn't perceive. What Maya learned through their connection confirmed her worst fears. The approaching ships weren't just Devourer vessels. They were scout ships, advanced elements of a much larger force that was still hidden in the spaces between spaces. The Devourers hadn't just returned. They had returned in numbers that dwarfed their previous invasion. Maya sat heavily on her narrow bed, processing the implications. The Academy's defenses, impressive as they were, would last approximately 10 minutes against a single Devourer battleship. The reinforcement fleets that Administrator Thane had mentioned would buy them perhaps an hour of additional time. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Through her connection with the Void Serpent, Maya could sense other presences moving in the deep spaces around the Academy. Her companion wasn't the only guardian that had been drawn to this place. Other ancient entities were stirring, responding to the return of their oldest enemies. But even with help from the galaxy's hidden protectors, the coming battle would be devastating. The Academy held nearly 50,000 of the galaxy's brightest young minds, representing every major civilization. If it fell to the Devourers, the loss would cripple galactic civilization's ability to defend itself. Maya stood and walked to her viewport, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, ancient enemies were approaching with technology and power that current galactic civilization couldn't comprehend. In a few hours, everything she had worked toward would be put to the ultimate test. She was still contemplating the situation when her room's communication system chimed. The display showed an encrypted message from Administrator Thane, requesting her immediate presence in his office. Maya's heart rate quickened. There were very few reasons why an Academy administrator would want to see her privately, especially during an emergency situation. Either she had somehow revealed too much about her background, or they had detected her companion's presence. Maya changed into a fresh uniform and made her way through the Academy's corridors toward the administrative section. The halls were quieter than usual, with most students confined to their quarters or assigned emergency stations. The few cadets she encountered moved with the focused urgency that came from knowing they might be facing real danger. Administrator Thane's office was located in the Academy's central command tower, 60 floors above the main level. The elevator ride gave Maya time to prepare for whatever she was about to face. Through her mental link, she could sense her companion's attention focusing on her location, ready to respond if she needed help. The office door opened as Maya approached, and she found Administrator Thane waiting inside. The room was larger than she had expected, with floor-to-ceiling viewports that offered a panoramic view of space. Holographic displays showed real-time tactical information, ship positions, and communication feed from across the local area. Cadet Chun, Thane said, his voice carrying none of the formal tone he had used during the assembly. Please sit down. We have much to discuss. Maya took the indicated chair, keeping her expression neutral despite her racing thoughts. Yes, sir. Thane moved to stand by the viewport, his shifting features more stable than usual. Tell me, Cadet, what do you know about the Void Serpents? The question hit Maya like a physical blow. She kept her expression carefully controlled, but inside, her mind was racing. How much did they know? How long had they been watching her? They're mentioned in xenobiology texts as a theoretical species, she replied carefully. Apex predators that supposedly exist in deep space, though most scholars believe they're mythological. Mythological, Thane repeated, his tone carrying amusement. Yes, that's what most scholars believe. It's convenient for them to think that, actually, makes their jobs much simpler if they don't have to account for creatures that exist outside the normal parameters of galactic biology. He turned from the viewport to face her directly. 3 weeks ago, one of these mythological creatures followed your transport ship all the way to Academy space. It remained in the area for several days before disappearing from our sensors. Most interesting, don't you think? Maya remained silent, waiting to see how much he actually knew. More interesting still, Thane continued. Your performance at the Academy has been exceptional. Your tactical insights go far beyond what we would expect from even the brightest human cadet. Your physical capabilities suggest training in disciplines that don't exist on human worlds. And your psychological profile indicates someone who has experienced far more than a typical 17-year-old from a backwater planet. He sat down across from her, his expression serious but not hostile. Would you care to explain any of this, Cadet Shun? Maya met his gaze steadily. The moment of truth had arrived. She could continue to deflect and deny, hoping to maintain her cover for a few more weeks or months. Or she could trust that the Academy's administrators were sophisticated enough to handle the reality of her situation. The approaching Devourer fleet made the decision for her. If the Academy was going to have any chance of surviving what was coming, they needed to know what they were really dealing with. The Void Serpent that followed our transport is my companion, she said quietly. We've been bonded since I was 7 years old. Thane's expression didn't change, but she could see the calculation in his eyes. Bonded. That's an interesting term. Can you elaborate? Maya took a deep breath. Void serpents are empathic creatures. Under very specific circumstances, they can form psychic bonds with other sentient beings. The bond creates a permanent connection that allows communication and, to some extent, sharing of abilities. And how does a human child from Earth come to be bonded with one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators? By saving its life, Maya replied simply, and by its saving mine in return. She could see that Thane wanted more details, but before he could ask, one of the holographic displays began flashing urgent warnings. The administrator turned his attention to the tactical readout, and Maya saw his features shift to expressions of alarm. What is it? She asked. The unknown fleet, Thane said, his voice tight with concern. They've accelerated their approach. They'll reach Academy space in 6 hours, not 18. Through her mental connection, Maya could sense her companion's growing agitation. The Void Serpent was detecting other presences now. Not just the approaching scout ships, but something much larger moving through dimensional space. Administrator, Maya said urgently, those ships aren't just unknown. They're devourers. Thane's head snapped around to stare at her. Devourers? The devourers are legend, myths from the galaxy's dark age. No, Maya said, standing up from her chair. They're real, and they're the reason void serpents and other guardian species exist. My companion has been monitoring their approach for days. This isn't just a scouting force. It's the advanced element of a full invasion. The administrator's features were cycling rapidly through different configurations, a sign of extreme stress among his species. If what you're saying is true, then the Academy's defenses are completely inadequate. They are, Maya confirmed. But there might be another option. Thane was already activating communication arrays, preparing to relay this information to Academy Command. What option? Maya walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars where she knew her companion was hidden. Guardian species exist throughout the galaxy, but they normally remain hidden from galactic civilization. The return of the Devourers changes that. If I can convince them to reveal themselves and fight openly, you're talking about creatures that most of the galaxy believes are mythological, Thane pointed out. How many of these guardians actually exist? Through her bond with the Void Serpent, Maya could sense the answer. Ancient minds were awakening throughout local space, responding to the approaching threat. Some were like her companion, vast creatures that existed partially outside normal dimensions. Others were different, but equally powerful. Enough, she said quietly. But they'll need a reason to trust galactic civilization. Right now, most of them see the current species as children playing with dangerous toys. Thane was studying her with new understanding. And you think you can convince them otherwise? I could try. But it means revealing everything about the bond, about the true nature of guardian species, about the real history of the Devourer Wars. The administrator was quiet for several long moments, weighing options that would determine the fate of everyone in Academy space. Finally, he nodded. Do it, he said. I'll inform Academy Command that we're implementing emergency protocols based on intelligence from unconventional sources. What do you need? Maya felt a surge of relief and determination. Access to the Academy's main communication array, and clearance to transmit on frequencies that normal equipment can't detect. Done. Thane was already entering authorization codes into his command console. Cadet Chun, Maya, I hope you understand what you're asking these creatures to risk. If they reveal themselves now, there's no going back to hiding. Maya nodded soberly. Understand. But if the Devourers aren't stopped here, there won't be anywhere left to hide. As she left Thane's office, heading toward the Academy's communication center, Maya could feel her companion's attention focusing on her thoughts. Through their bond, she could sense its approval of her decision and its readiness to stand with the Academy against whatever was coming. But she could also sense something else, anticipation, as if her companion had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. The galaxy's greatest secret was about to be revealed, and Maya Chun was going to be the one to reveal it. She just hoped they would be strong enough to handle the truth. The Academy's primary communication center occupied an entire level of the central command tower, its vast chamber filled with arrays that could reach across the galaxy in real time. Maya stood before the main transmitter, her hands poised over controls that she had only read about in theoretical texts. Administrator Thane had granted her unprecedented access, but using it properly would require abilities that went far beyond normal technical knowledge. She closed her eyes and reached out through her mental connection to her companion. The Void Serpent responded immediately, its consciousness touching hers across the dimensional barriers that separated them. Through their bond, Maya could sense other ancient minds stirring throughout local space. Creatures that had remained hidden for millennia were awakening in response to the Devourer threat. Beginning transmission, she announced to the Academy personnel monitoring the communication center. This may take several minutes. Maya's fingers moved across the control surfaces with fluid precision, guided by knowledge that came from her companion's understanding of multidimensional communication. The transmitter began broadcasting on frequencies that existed partially outside normal space-time, carrying messages to intelligences that most galactic species had never imagined. The first response came almost immediately. Through her mental link, Maya felt her companion's recognition of another presence, something vast and ancient that existed in the deep ocean of a distant world. The entity's consciousness was alien, but benevolent, carrying memories of conflicts that stretched back millions of years. More responses followed in rapid succession. A crystalline intelligence that had grown within the heart of an asteroid field for eons. Gaseous beings that rode solar winds between star systems. Energy creatures that existed in the spaces between atoms. Each one was different, but all shared a common purpose, protecting younger species from threats they couldn't comprehend. Maya, Administrator Thane said quietly, watching the communication displays with amazement, "What exactly are you talking out there?" "The galaxy's true guardians," she replied, her voice distant as she maintained contact with multiple entities simultaneously. They've been protecting civilized space for millions of years, but always from the shadows. The Devourers are the reason they exist. Through her connection, Maya began to piece together the true history of the galaxy, a history that wasn't recorded in any Academy database. Millions of years ago, the Devourers had swept across known space like a plague, consuming entire star systems and leaving only empty void in their wake. They weren't just conquerors. They were something far worse, entities that fed on the life force of entire civilizations. The Guardian species had emerged during that dark age, evolving or transforming specifically to combat the Devourer threat. Some, like the Void Serpents, developed abilities that let them exist partially outside normal spacetime. Others became beings of pure energy or crystalline matrices that could survive the Devourer's life-draining attacks. The war had raged for millennia, ending only when the Guardians managed to drive the Devourers beyond the galactic rim. But it had been a Pyrrhic victory. The cost had been so enormous that both sides had retreated into hiding, the Devourers to lick their wounds in the dark spaces between galaxies, and the Guardians to watch and wait for their inevitable return. "They're coming," Maya said, opening her eyes to look at the tactical displays. "Not just the scout force we detected. The main Devourer fleet is moving through folded space, approaching from a direction our sensors can't detect." Administrator Thane was coordinating with Academy Command, relaying information that must have sounded impossible to the senior officers. "How many ships are we talking about?" Maya consulted the knowledge flowing through her Guardian connections. "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. They've spent the last 1,000,000 years building their strength, preparing for a return that would leave no survivors." The tactical displays began showing new contacts as Academy sensors detected the approaching scout force. The ships that appeared were unlike anything in current galactic design. Massive, angular vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their hulls showed no seams or obvious weapons ports, giving them the appearance of having been grown rather than constructed. "Estimated time to engagement?" Thane asked. "4 hours for the scouts," Maya replied. 6 hours for the main fleet." Through her mental connection, she could sense her companion moving closer to the Academy, abandoning its hiding place to take position for the coming battle. Other Guardians were doing the same throughout the local area, ancient beings emerging from their concealment to stand against their oldest enemies. But even with the Guardians' help, Maya knew the battle would be devastating. The Devourers had learned from their previous defeat, developing new weapons and tactics specifically designed to counter Guardian abilities. This time, they wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating their opponents. "Maya," Administrator Thane said, his voice carrying new urgency. "Can your Guardian allies protect the Academy? Can they evacuate our students?" "Some of them," Maya replied honestly, "but not all. The Academy holds 50,000 people, and the Guardians aren't designed for mass evacuation. They're weapons of war, not rescue vessels." The administrator was quiet for several moments, processing the implications. "Then, we need to buy time for a conventional evacuation. How long can the Guardians hold the Devourers back?" Maya consulted the tactical assessments flowing through her connections. The Guardian species had spent the last 1,000,000 years preparing for this moment, but so had their enemies. It would be a close fight. "Long enough," she said with more confidence than she felt. "But there's something else. The Guardians are willing to reveal themselves and fight openly, but they need something in return." "What?" "They want the Academy's students to witness the battle, to learn the truth about galactic history and understand what really protects civilized space. If we're going to survive this war, the next generation needs to know about the Guardian's existence." Thane's features shifted through several configurations as he processed this request. "You're asking us to turn our students into witnesses to an ancient war." "I'm asking you to prepare them for the reality they're going to face," Maya corrected. "The Devourers aren't going to stop with the Academy. If they're not defeated here, they'll continue their advance into the galactic core. Every world, every civilization, every species will eventually face what we're facing now." The communication array chimed with an incoming transmission from Academy Command. Admiral Kresh, the Academy's commanding officer, appeared on the main display. The Korvac officer's expression showed the strain of coordinating a defense against an unknown threat. Administrator Thane, the Admiral said without preamble, we need more information about these approaching vessels. Our tactical analysis suggests they're using technology decades in advance of current galactic standards. Thane glanced at Maya, who nodded her permission to share what they had learned. Admiral, the approaching fleet consists of vessels belonging to an ancient enemy species known as the Devourers. They pose an extinction-level threat to galactic civilization. However, we have potentially powerful allies available to assist in our defense. Admiral Kresh's expression shifted to one of confusion. Allies? What allies? Our nearest friendly fleet is 6 hours away, and these unknowns will reach us in 4. Unconventional allies, sir. I'm transmitting tactical data now that will explain the situation. Maya watched as the information flowed to Academy Command. Sanitized versions of what she had learned about the Guardians, tactical assessments of Devourer capabilities, and projections of the coming battle. She could see Admiral Kresh's expression change as he processed the data, moving from confusion to disbelief to grim acceptance. This is impossible, the Admiral said finally. You're telling me that mythological creatures are real, and that we're about to face an invasion from an enemy that supposedly vanished millions of years ago. Yes, sir, Thane replied calmly. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Admiral Kresh was quiet for several long moments. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of command decisions that could affect the survival of an entire civilization. If even half of this information is accurate, conventional defensive strategies are useless. What do these Guardian allies require from us? Maya stepped forward, entering the communication field. Admiral, they need Academy Command to authorize full transparency with your student body. The Guardians will reveal themselves and fight openly, but only if the next generation of galactic leaders understands what they're witnessing. You want me to expose 50,000 cadets to combat between species that aren't supposed to exist? I wanted to give them a chance to understand what they're really fighting for, Maya replied, and what they'll be fighting against in the years to come. The Admiral studied her through the holographic display, his expression showing the calculation of someone weighing impossible options. Cadet Shun, if I authorize this revelation, there's no going back. The knowledge you're talking about will change how our entire civilization views its place in the galaxy. With respect, sir, the Devourers are going to change that regardless. The question is whether we meet that change with knowledge and preparation or with ignorance and panic. Admiral Kresh was nodding slowly. Authorization granted. Implement whatever protocols your Guardian allies require. And, Cadet Shun, I hope you understand what you've set in motion. The communication ended, leaving Maya and Administrator Thane alone in the communication center. Outside the viewports, space still looked peaceful, but Maya could sense the growing tension as ancient enemies prepared to clash once again. What happens now? Thane asked. Maya returned her attention to the communication array, sending confirmation to the Guardian species throughout local space. Now we prepare our students for the greatest lesson in galactic history. And we hope the Guardians remember how to fight as well as they remember how to hide. 2 hours later, every student in the academy was assembled in the Great Hall, a massive amphitheater at the station's heart that could accommodate the entire population. Maya stood on the main platform beside Admiral Kresh and the senior faculty, feeling the weight of 50,000 stares focused on her small form. The Admiral had explained the approaching threat in general terms, describing an unknown enemy force that required unconventional defensive measures. Now it was Maya's turn to reveal the truth that would change their understanding of everything. Students of the Galactic Defense Academy, she began, her voice amplified to carry throughout the enormous space. What you are about to witness will challenge everything you believe about the galaxy's history. You will see creatures that your textbooks claim are mythological. You will watch a war that supposedly ended millions of years ago. Most importantly, you will understand why your training here is more crucial than you ever imagined. She gestured to the holographic displays around the amphitheater, which showed real-time views of the space around the Academy. To the assembled students, it looked empty except for the defensive formations of Academy ships. The truth is that our civilization has never been alone in the galaxy. Ancient species have watched over younger races for millions of years, protecting us from threats we couldn't comprehend. They've remained hidden because most civilizations aren't ready to accept their existence. Maya reached out through her mental connection, sending a signal that resonated across dimensional barriers. Today, that changes. The holographic displays flickered, then showed something that made 50,000 students gasp in unison. Space around the Academy was suddenly filled with shapes that defied easy description. Massive forms that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. Maya's companion was there, its moon-sized bulk moving with impossible grace between the Academy's towers. But it wasn't alone. Other guardians had revealed themselves, crystalline entities that sparkled with internal light, energy beings that rode magnetic fields like cosmic surfers, creatures of living shadow that bent space around themselves. These are the galaxy's true protectors, Maya announced as awed murmurs rippled through the assembled students. They call themselves Guardians, and they've been fighting a war to protect civilized space since before most of our species existed. The displays shifted to show the approaching Devourer Scout Force, their dark ships moving with predatory intent toward the Academy. Unlike the graceful forms of the Guardians, the Devourer vessels radiated malevolence, angular, hungry shapes that seemed to devour light itself. These are the Devourers, Maya continued, her voice carrying clearly despite the growing tension in the hall. They're the reason the Guardians exist. 1,000,000 years ago, they swept across the galaxy, consuming entire civilizations. The Guardians drove them back, but at enormous cost. Now they've returned, and they won't make the same mistakes they made before. She could see the impact of her words on the assembled students. Faces that had shown skepticism and confusion now displayed growing understanding and fear. These weren't just theoretical exercises or historical lessons. They were witnessing the prelude to a battle that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. Through her mental connection, Maya could sense her companion's readiness for battle, along with the grim determination of the other Guardians. They had hoped this day would never come, but they had prepared for it throughout their long vigil. Admiral Kresh has asked me to explain why you need to witness what happens next, Maya said, her voice growing stronger as she drew on the confidence flowing through her Guardian bond. Because this is your war too. The Devourers won't stop with the Academy. If they're not defeated here, they'll continue into the galactic core, consuming every world, every species, every trace of the civilization you've sworn to protect. The first explosions lit up space around the Academy as the Devourer scout ships encountered the Guardians' advance elements. The holographic displays showed energy discharges that defied conventional physics, weapons that attacked targets across multiple dimensions simultaneously, defensive systems that existed partially outside normal space-time. Maya watched her fellow students' reactions as ancient enemies clashed in the space around their home. Some showed fear, others fascination, but most displayed the kind of focused attention that came from recognizing something fundamentally important. The Guardians are revealing themselves because they need you to understand what you're really training to become, she continued. Not just officers in a conventional military, but the next generation of protectors for an entire galaxy. The knowledge and skills you're learning here will be crucial in the war that's coming. The battle was intensifying around them. Maya could see Guardian beings engaging Devourer ships with weapons and tactics that looked like magic to anyone unfamiliar with multidimensional physics. Her companion was in the thick of the fighting, its massive form weaving between enemy vessels with impossible agility. But the Devourers were fighting back with equal ferocity, their ships deploying weapons that targeted the Guardians' exotic abilities. Dark energy beams that could disrupt dimensional barriers, void bombs that created temporary black holes, life-drain weapons that could weaken even the most ancient guardian species. They're learning, Maya realized with growing alarm. Through her connection, she could sense her companion's surprise at the Devourer's new capabilities. The ancient enemies had indeed spent their exile well, developing counters for every guardian advantage. The main Devourer fleet chose that moment to emerge from folded space, appearing in the Academy's local area like a plague of dark stars. Thousands of ships, each one massive enough to destroy planets, materialized in perfect formation around the Academy's defensive perimeter. The assembled students fell silent as they processed the scale of the threat they were facing. Even with the Guardians' help, they were outnumbered by factors that made victory seem impossible. "This is what we're really fighting against," Maya said quietly, her voice still carrying clearly through the hushed amphitheater. "Not just an enemy fleet, but the antithesis of everything civilized space represents. The Devourers don't just conquer, they consume. They leave nothing behind except empty void." Admiral Kresh stepped forward, his massive Korvok frame radiating authority even in the face of overwhelming odds. "Students of the Academy, you are witnessing history. Some of you may not survive what comes next, but all of you now understand why your training matters and what you'll be fighting to protect." He gestured to the tactical displays, which showed the full scope of the battle developing around them. "The Guardians are buying us time to evacuate non-essential personnel and prepare final defensive positions. But this station is more than just a military academy. It's a symbol of what cooperation between species can accomplish. We will not abandon it without a fight." Through her mental connection, Maya felt her companion's acknowledgement of the Admiral's decision. The Guardians would continue fighting regardless, but knowing they had allies among the younger species added strength to their resolve. The battle reached a new level of intensity as the main Devourer fleet engaged the Guardian forces. Maya watched in fascination and horror as weapons beyond current galactic understanding clashed in the space around the Academy. Reality itself seemed to bend and warp under the stress of the combat, with space-time distortions creating brief glimpses of other dimensions. "Maya," Administrator Thane said quietly, approaching her position on the platform, "your Guardian friends need to know that we're beginning evacuation procedures. The Academy's civilian population will be removed to safe distance, but combat personnel will remain to support the defense." Maya nodded and relayed the information through her mental link. Her companion's response carried both approval and concern, approval for the Academy's tactical decision, but concern for Maya's safety as the battle escalated. "They want me to evacuate too," she said to Administrator Thane. "But I can't. The connection between me and my companion makes me useful for coordinating between Guardian and Academy forces. And if something happens to you?" Maya looked out at the battle raging around them, where ancient beings fought with weapons that could crack planets. "If something happens to me, at least these students will know what they're really fighting for." The evacuation proceeded with remarkable efficiency, considering that most of the Academy's population had never experienced a real emergency. Transport ships moved in carefully coordinated patterns, carrying non-essential personnel away from the battle zone, while combat units took defensive positions throughout the station. Maya remained on the command deck, serving as a communication link between Academy Tactical Command and the Guardian forces. Through her mental connection, she could coordinate Guardian movements with Academy defensive plans, creating a unified strategy that neither side could have managed alone. The Devourers, however, were adapting to the combined defense faster than anyone had expected. Their ships began targeting the weakest links in the Academy Guardian alliance, focusing on areas where coordination was imperfect or communication delayed. "They're learning our patterns," Admiral Kresh observed grimly, watching as a Devourer assault group broke through a section of the defensive perimeter. "Whatever intelligence these creatures possess, it's sophisticated enough to analyze our tactics in real time." Maya consulted the information flowing through her Guardian connections. "The Guardians say that's typical Devourer behavior. They're not just predators. They're strategic thinkers with millions of years of combat experience. A new contact appeared on the tactical displays. Something massive emerging from folded space near the edge of the Academy's sensor range. This wasn't another ship, but something that defied easy categorization. It was roughly spherical, but its surface showed no consistent features, as if it existed partially outside normal dimensions. "What is that?" Admiral Kresh demanded. Through her mental connection, Maya felt her companion's recognition and dread. "That's a devourer world eater. They use them to consume entire planets, converting the matter and energy into resources for their fleet." The implications were clear. The devourers weren't just trying to destroy the Academy. They were planning to consume the entire star system, leaving nothing behind except empty space. "Estimated time until that thing reaches effective range?" the Admiral asked. Maya consulted her Guardian connections. 40 minutes. Maybe less. Admiral Kresh was already issuing orders to accelerate the evacuation and prepare final defensive positions. But Maya could see the futility in his tactical displays. Even if they held the Devourer fleet back for another hour, the World Eater would eventually reach them. Unless the Guardians had one final strategy they hadn't revealed yet. Through her mental connection, Maya sensed her companion's grim determination and something else. Preparation for a sacrifice that would either save the Academy or destroy everything within a light-year radius. The greatest battle in a million years was approaching its climax, and Maya was about to learn whether the bonds between allies could overcome the hunger of ancient enemies.